Hello everyone, it's Jen. Welcome back to another project for Heffy Doodle. Today I'm showing you how you can create a really easy but pretty ink blended ombre night sky, and I'm featuring these little cute owls from the Hootiful stamp set. There's lots of great sentiments in this stamp set and those owls are just too cute for words. So I'm going to start off with the coloring here. So for their faces and bellies, I decided to do a lighter kind of like a caramel brown color. So I'm using E33 as my darkest, E53 as the mid-tone, and E51 as the lightest. And I just decided to have the shadows kind of more towards the top part of their face and then underneath their neck and around their wings. And I added some darker shades to the bottoms of their bellies as well. Now I did go over this twice just to make sure that there was a nice smooth blend and you could really see those darker colors blend into the lighter colors. For their bodies and their heads, I decided to go with a darker brown color combination. So I'm using E29 as the darkest, E27 as the mid-tone, and then E37 as my lightest. Now this is almost a little bit like a chocolate brown color, but bringing in that E37 brings in a really pretty red undertone. So I really like this combination for our brown owls. Now for the beak and the feet, I'm using E44 and Y28. So this is going to give me like a brownish gold type color. And then moving on to the wood for the tree trunk and then for the branch, I'm using E47 as the darkest color, E44 and E43, and then for the lightest area on the top of that little cut off piece of wood, I'm going to bring in, I believe it's E41. I will show you that marker. So just bringing in that darkest color to lay down the darkest shadow. Now for the darkest color on the top of the stump there, I'm using E44 and then blending that out with the E43, and then we'll have that lightest color. I just wanted it to be a little bit different than the bottom portion. So the bottom portion is going to be darker than the top. And you can see that E41 is quite a bit lighter. It will dry back even lighter once it's dry, and you'll see that here after I get this second coat on. I wanted, like I said, that bottom portion to be darker, so I'm bringing in a lot more of the darkest and the mid-tone there. And then using that same color combination for the branch, I'm just not going to use the E41. So for the greens, I wanted to go with a little bit more of a muted green color, given that this is a nighttime sky. So I'm using G24, and then I'm bringing in this G85. And you can see that gives me that little bit of a more olivey green almost. And then for the lightest, I'm using BG93. So it's technically a blue-green color, but it matches really well with that G85. And then again, bringing in that brighter G24 for the tips of my leaves. Now for the moon, I didn't want a yellow moon. I wanted more of a night, kind of white with a bluish undertone. So I'm using C3, C0, and then I'm bringing in the B32 here. And I'm going to blend that back out with the C0 and then use my colorless blender. And that's going to give me a really nice, almost like a whitish blue moon. And then I'm just going to use my colorless blender here to fix up where I went out of the lines. Okay, so I'm making a slimline card today, and like I mentioned, I'm going to do an ombre night sky. So for my lightest color, I'm using Distress Oxide in Tumbled Glass, and then I'm going to use Salty Ocean as my mid-tone. And I colored a lot of the bottom panel here with the lightest color just so I could get a smooth blend between the Tumbled Glass and the Salty Ocean. I am using Bristol Smooth cardstock. This is the easiest cardstock to blend on, whether you're using the Distress Oxides or the regular Distress inks. And I just have a piece of scrap paper there underneath my fingers so I don't get any fingerprints in my ink blending. So I'm just working those two colors together. I am going to bring in a couple of darker colors here next, but I want the lightest color to the bottom, almost like the moon is casting a glow from the bottom, the earth, up into the sky. So for my darkest colors, I'm using chipped sapphire, and so I'm going to add that to the top of my card panel here. And this is cut to a slimline size of 3.5 by 8.5. And then I can go ahead and add this to a card base at the same width. So I'm also going to bring in my black soot just to really darken this up. So I want there to be that darkest color at the very top, and I'm bringing that down slowly, and then I'm going to blend that chipped sapphire back in. And I left all the ink blending in so you can see that it's okay if you need to go over it a few times to get that blend that you're looking for. So now that I have this done, I'm going to bring that salty ocean kind of mid-tone color back in here, and I'm going to blend that into the chipped sapphire. So you can see how much of the tumbled glass is actually getting covered as I work my way through the ink blending. And then again, I'll bring that tumbled glass back. So once I get my background done, the next step will be to put the card together. And I recently saw a post on a Facebook group where someone asked if you do the embossing first or second when you have an ink blended background. So I'll talk about that a little bit. Typically, I like to do my heat embossing after I've done the ink blending, and that's usually just because I want to make sure that I like how the ink blended background turns out before I move forward with the card. But you do have to let this ink dry before you do some heat embossing. So I would say if you don't have the patience to let your ink dry, then go ahead and do your ink embossing or your heat embossing first, and then you can bring the inks, the distress oxides, right over top of that. And then you simply just want to take a dry cloth and wipe off the ink that's on top of your heat embossing. So I'm going to go ahead with my embossing now. So I'm using Versamark. This is a really sticky ink that the embossing powder will stick to. And I'm using 2 of the stars in the stamp set. So one's a little bit bigger, and then there's a smaller one. And I'm just placing this all over my background. I am turning my stamp block as I do this, so the patterns don't look exactly the same. And then I'm taking that littlest star and I'm just going to add that to some of the clusters so that there's clusters of 3, and then also just randomly kind of putting that smaller star on the background. You do have quite a bit of time before the Versamark ink will dry. So I have everything done, and then I'm going to be using the Wow Metallic Silver Sparkle Embossing Powder, and this stuff is so gorgeous. It's so glittery. I'm just going to pour that over top of a coffee filter. And you can see because my background is dry, I did let this dry for several hours and came back to it. It's not sticking anywhere on my card panel here. You can use an embossing buddy, which is like a little powdered bag, or the tool, and both of those will help ensure that your embossing powder doesn't stick on to your background. So I am just heating this a little bit from the back first, and then I'm going to go ahead and heat all my little stars from the front, and you can see that embossing powder melting, and it looks so pretty. So to do the bottom, I decided to take the Grassy borders from Heffy Doodle and cut it out of some of the black cardstock. That way it didn't bring in a different color of green, and I think it plays nicely with the night sky atmosphere that I'm going for. So you can see here I colored up all of the little owls in the stamp set. They're just so cute. I couldn't decide which ones I wanted to use, so I decided to use them all, and that's what I love about slimline cards is you can use so many images and create a really cute scene card. So I'm going to have 2 of the owls here down to the bottom, and then a couple more in some of the branches moving up towards the top of my card, and then the one flying owl, I'm going to have him closest to the moon. So you can see here with the ombre ink blending, you get that really pretty glow with that lightest color, the tumbled glass at the bottom. And then as you go up, it gets quite a bit darker and just really gives a beautiful effect for a nighttime scene. Now you will notice I haven't done my sentiment yet. I wanted to get all of my little owls in place and set my scene before I did that. So I will come back to that once I have everything glued down to my card panel here. I love those two little owls at the bottom. I feel like it's almost like a mama owl giving a lesson to a younger owl, and I love how his wings are just kind of out fluttering and he just looks so happy, so cute. I'm gonna have this owl here to the left hand side of the card panel, and I did kind of change up how I put those branches on my scene so they looked a little bit different. So that one to the bottom left, I'm using the majority of the branch. And then over to the right where I have the owl, I'm going to add two of them. And I'm not going to have both of those the entire branch. So I'm going to trim those off a bit. And I feel like that just gives those branches a different look even though it's the same stamp. So I went ahead and glued down my moon and my little flying owl. And then I'm going to go ahead and place this last owl down here. I'm just trying to figure out where I want him, and when I'm placing these down, I wanted a bunch of the stars still to be showing. So I was kind of taking that into consideration as I was gluing these guys down for this little scene card. So here you can see I'm going to place that second branch kind of in the middle where there's the opening, and then I'm going to trim quite a bit of that off from my card panel. And you may notice here I do have some really sticky double-sided tape already on the back of my panel. I find with heat embossing your paper can warp a little bit, and so that double-sided adhesive works really great to secure that down to your card base without any kind of bubbling from the heat embossing. So just making sure I have these down nice and secure, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment. So I am going to cut this sentiment here. I just kind of fold my stamp down where I want to make the cut line and then use my scissors. I know a lot of people don't like cutting their stamps, but I think if you're going to get more use out of them by cutting them, if it makes it easier for you, go ahead. You can butt them back up together and they will fit perfectly just like they were before you trim them. So I'm actually using two of these sentiments from the stamp set, and I'm going to heat emboss these again with that Wow Metallic Silver Sparkle so that it matches the stars. I think this would have looked nice in a white embossing powder as well, but I wanted to keep things consistent. So I am just using my Versamark ink here again. I stamped this twice just to ensure that I had a good impression with all of the letters in the sentiment, and I'm going to drop my glitter here. So this is why it's always good to work over a coffee filter or a piece of paper, because it caught all of that embossing powder that spilled out when I dropped it. But anyways, all was saved, which made me happy. So now you can see the sentiment come to life. So it says, I thank my lucky stars. And then the bottom one is for you who, which is really cute. And now because my fingers were kind of on that panel quite a bit as I was creating the card, there were some areas where the heat embossing stuck. So I just used a dry paintbrush to clean that up. And there we go. I've melted my sentiment. I'm going to add some black glaze pen to their eyes. And then a little bit of white dot detail here with a size 10 white gel pen. And that will be it for the finishing touches on this card. So here's a look at the card, and here is the color map with all of the Copic colors I used for today's card. So thank you so much for joining us here at Heffy Doodle. Here's a couple more videos for you to watch until we are back with the next video. Take care, everyone. Have a fantastic day. All the links will be down below for the products that I used. I'll see you soon. Bye.